Good evening. Welcome and thank you for taking your time in your evening to come join us. We're thrilled to have you here. Here at Allen, we love doing what we do, and so it's a great chance for us to share some of our knowledge and bring people from the community together. So the presentation tonight, there's sort of two sides of it. We're the construction company. Margie Grace's company handles the landscaping side. And so our focus is on how do you capture water from the house and prevent water from leaving the property that could be used on the property. And her job is to make things beautiful and to put the right plants in place in order to use that water. This is a project that we work together on up on the Mesa here in Santa Barbara, which has won numerous awards for us. So it's a great example of working together collaboratively for that. So when in a drought, obviously there's not a lot of water available, so catching and utilizing the water that's on site is important. And there's several elements to that. Most municipalities, and here in Santa Barbara, there's a laundry landscape program, which is you use the pump on your washing machine in order to pump the water from the laundry out into the garden. There's very prescriptive measures for that. It's an over-the-counter permit. It does require going in and attaching to the plumbing and providing piping to bring that water outside. There are certain regulations as far as you cannot store water on site. Gray water can go septic in less than 24 hours, and so it's got to be utilized directly to the landscaping. It needs to go to plants that are going to utilize that water well, which again is Margie's expertise. It needs to exit under mulch. It can't just daylight to the ground because it can attract animals and become a nuisance. And that's sort of the basics to that. So again, it can be, if your laundry machines are near an exterior wall in the house, that can be a really easy way to capture some of the water you're utilizing for your garden. You also don't want to use it on any plants that you're going to be eating that might come in contact with water, like strawberries. They grow low to the ground. It's not a good plant to irrigate with that. If you have an orchard and trees, that's a great example of something to use it on. And catchment is the next item to consider, and that's taking all the water that falls on the house through the gutter system and trying to capture that and utilize it on site. You can also capture it from hardscape, from patios and drains under the ground. It is a little intensive to set up because you need something to store all that water in. We're doing a project up here on top of the Riviera. They have a 10,000 gallon cistern under a portion of the house, which is a really big tank. But they're doing gray water, they're doing rainwater catchment, and it's a big property, so their goal is to capture as much of the water as they can and utilize it on the property. Managing rainwater is more sort of a hybrid between your hardscape surfaces and your landscape, and directing that water with the sloping of the land itself in order to capture it and direct it to where it's going to be best utilized. Managing the runoff is trying to keep the water that falls on the property, not letting it run off to the street, say from driveways and hardscape areas, but finding ways to mitigate that water leaving the property. And another thing to consider is using native plants. Again, that's Margie's expertise, but using plants that don't use that much water to begin with. If you're growing tropical plants, they love water, they're really thirsty, and you're going to end up using a lot more water. And then there's also your hardscapes, which can be good or bad depending on how they're utilized. If you're using them to capture water, how they direct water, and there's also some drought tolerant features that allow the water to permeate those hardscapes as opposed to sheet flowing from the property. So creating permeable surfaces. Here, as you can see here, there's space in between these stones that allow any water to fall on the property to infiltrate the ground in a very natural way. That actually recharges your groundwater, it's environmentally friendly, you're not overloading the storm drain system, your soil is the first place to mitigate pollutants, Again, any water you can keep on the property is a benefit. Some good options for that. You can read the list here: crushed gravel, porous pavers. Most of the driveway pavers you see are not very porous. They actually, if they're not sealed, they only permeate about 10% of the water that falls on them. If they are sealed, they only permeate about 3% of the water. So we're talking about specific types of pavers that are designed to let the water flow through. Even the base below the pavers is very different. It's usually much deeper, and it's a lot more intensive to put that system in, but again, it can really benefit the property and how the water is captured. The stone pavers, that's the one I was talking about. It's not very permeable. Brick pavers, the same thing. Porous concrete is actually a concrete that has channels in it that allow the water to flow through the concrete. So instead of your typical hard surface concrete, it looks slightly different. It's not as dense of a material, and again, it keeps all that water from leaving the property and charges the soil on your property, which can be a great benefit. And then decomposed granites, I'm sure you're probably all familiar with that. It's a very standard landscaping feature here. It's crushed rock that we can use for making pathways or hard surfaces, but that let the water permeate. Adding rain gardens can be a great way to capture that water. Down in LA, where we've begun doing more projects, it's actually mandated on a lot of the jobs. And that is, even the water that comes down off your roof and your downspouts has to go to rain garden, where that water gets utilized, treated by the soil there before it goes to an overflow and goes to the street. In a heavy rain event, it's not necessarily going to capture all of the water that falls on the property, but it's a great first step, as well as it can be a really beautiful feature on your project that can, again, the goal is to utilize the water that falls and to keep it there on site. Typically it's going to be a lower place on the property. They will collect and temporarily hold the runoff. Again, you can take it from the roof or other hard surfaces, and we direct the water to those locations. Bioswales. So this is an example of a bioswale. What you see, the main feature is the rocks that are there, but it's also the sides of that and the way those get planted out. You can see down along the bottom, I'd have to ask Marjorie, but these are much more water-friendly plants. Down in the bottom is reedy-looking plants.
Yeah. What you're after are things in nature that handle being wet and dry. So we call them high water use and low water demand. So if water's there, it sucks it up. If not, they just hang out. So there's native ones. These ones are South African, as they turn out. They have no.
Right. So again, it's utilizing what you have there in order to capture and beautify the property at the same time in a way that's going to use less water and utilize the water that you do have there. So we talked a little bit about catchment earlier, and again, that's capturing the rain that falls on your hard surfaces or on your roof and directing it to a tank. Here's a large cistern being placed on one of our projects, and there's very simple systems. Once you put the water in there, you also have to get it back out of there. So typically you're going to have pump systems in order to do that, and an irrigation system to bring it out to distribute it to the plants on site. There's a company based down in Redondo Beach we're actually working with on the large property up on top of the Riviera, where municipalities, like I said before, you cannot store gray water, but their system quadruple filters the water, UV treats it, and ozonates it and recirculates it every 24 hours. And so they get around the codes in a way that you are allowed to store that water and utilize it for future use. They actually did the Santa Monica Library, and they've done large municipal projects. It's costly. You have equipment that's going to need maintenance over time, and it's set up so that if you run out of water here, then it's going to go back to utilizing your municipal water. But again, they're capturing all the roof off, all the water off the roof, off their hard surfaces, decks, gray water, and utilizing the system, and it's going to greatly benefit the property.
Before you move, what's the size of that tank?
I don't know the
In
answer
terms
to
of
that.
the amount of gallons it holds.
I don't know the answer to that, I apologize.
I can find out if we can.
No.
Yeah, I'm just
Great.
curious, as to, you said like, some other house that had 10,000.
Right.
So I just.
Yeah, like, but I don't believe that's 10,000 gallons,
I
so it
have
looks
to-
a bit small to me,
Yeah, if I have to guess, I'm thinking around 5,000.
around
But
5,000.
it's a weird perspective, you can't really measure off of, I can't tell how tall it is.
No, but I see the guy there, I just,
Yeah.
just some sense of it.
Yeah,
Between
no,
5
good
and
question.
7 is my
Thank you.
guess.
So back to gray water. So gray water is utilizing water you've already used in the house once and putting it back out to use again in your landscape. You're allowed to capture that water from your tubs, your showers, and your bath sinks and your laundry, not from your toilets for obvious reasons, and also not from your kitchen sink because it contains what we call FOG, or FOG, which is food, oils, and grease, which can clog the system. They're a nuisance. They're going to go foul much faster. Again, as I said earlier, it shouldn't come in contact with the edible portions of plants. So again, I would work with a landscape designer to make certain that it's going to plants, or do your own research to make sure that it's going to go to plants that are going to be able to utilize that water well. Gray water systems, as I say, can be very simple, as in the case of the laundry to landscape. They can also be very complex. Because you have to have a separate waste system of plumbing for each location that you're drawing the water from, and valves to control that water such that you can switch it back to your normal sewer if it's not in use. There's strict codes that mandate and regulate that. So the best time to do gray water is if you're doing a remodel already anyway, or if you're under construction. If you're a slab on grade house, it makes it much more difficult because you might have to cut into concrete in order to get to that water. If it's a raised foundation house, it's much easier to do that work. But again, it can be intrusive, but you can also get smart and say, okay, well, these bathroom sinks in 3 locations are located on an exterior wall, and that's very easy to get to. So you can always work with your property in order to manage it to your best ability. Smart irrigation. We can drive everything from our iPhones now. You can drive your irrigation systems from your iPhones now. The smart systems that are out there, they manage rainfall and are going to turn off if it's rain, so you don't see your sprinklers going on while the rain's falling. It's going to, you can manage the moisture level of the soil, so it only comes on when the soil becomes depleted to the point where it needs extra water. And it can also alert you if there's a break in the system, if things are malfunctioning, and so it keeps you from wasting water in that way as well. Most systems overwater. And when the drought happened and they started restricting water up here a couple of years ago, we started getting phone calls from people going, what do I do? And the landscapers found that a lot of the systems were like 70% of the water was going to waste.
Turn it down.
That's to you turn it down. You don't use as much water. You make sure they're pointed in the right direction, that you don't have any broken heads, and that you're not leaking and losing water. And again, working with your landscaping and making sure that you're directing that water where it's going to its best use. And then hardscapes are the hard portion of your landscape. Working with that to either capture the water or lead the water in the right direction. Going through the design of that, spending that time. We're a huge proponent of spending more time in pre-construction, more time in design, in order to make certain that what you end up with at the end is what you want, and that your hard-earned dollars are going to the right place in your project. And so considering all of these things during the pre-construction phase and saying, okay, well, where can we capture this water from? Or how are we going to use the hardscape and the design to direct this water where it's most appreciated is huge. And again, it sort of blurs the line between what Margie does and what we does. I think sometimes you handle the hardscape, sometimes we handle the hardscape. But, you know, it's always a team effort, working with your other consultants and your other design and installation team members in order to get everything right. Are there any questions? I know that's a lot of information all at once, but.
The gray water system is, could you talk a little bit more about what the different tiers are? You said that there are extremely complicated systems. We're gonna go from like, you know, laundry to irrigation or laundry to watering, but like what are some of like the tiers? Like what's the top end?
Well, sort of the simplest one is the laundry to landscape, because your washing machine already has a pump that it uses to eject the water, and so you're allowed to use that to pump directly out to your garden. And so, especially if it's on an exterior wall in the house where it's easily accessible, where you can grab that water, put the pipes in to direct it out there, that's probably the simplest. Next best case scenario is if you have sinks near an exterior wall, or you're on a raised foundation and you have tubs or shower drains that you can access readily from below. Those are really, especially if you're on a raised foundation, it's very easy to get under the house, have a plumber access those, and run the second set of lines and the valves that are necessary to control that. The problem once it's under the house is you might need a pump to get it back above ground if the ground on the property doesn't slope away. So it's really product specific. The worst case scenario is if you're slab on grade and all of your pipes are already underground, and or it's a flat lot and so there's no way to get slope and flow out to your garden. And again, they tend to be, you know, when you get into trying to pick up every fixture in the house, that can be really complex, and if you're not doing a remodel, that can be a lot of work. Once your walls are open, it's just running new piping, which is relatively simple.
And Preston back here is with our energy division, so if you have questions after,
Yeah.
he focuses on that.
Yeah, they do laundry landscape installations.
And you use all kinds of soap, you don't have to use Dr. Bronner.
No, you don't have to use Dr. Bronner's. I think there's better soaps than others. You know, the people I've talked to who are experts about it, they say, well, obviously you don't want to use a lot of bleach. You do have to take some care, and there's soaps you don't want to use, but it leaves a lot of soaps that you can use.
I just have a question. How, if you're doing a laundry to landscape, is there a distance limit? I mean, could you run a line that's 50 feet from the?
As long as it has enough slope, I don't know that there's a distance limit. But what they don't want is water sitting in the line becoming stagnant and going septic.
What does that mean, septic, and rainwater doesn't go septic as
Well, it doesn't have as many contaminants in it.
Right.
So your soap is made of organic material, and you know, so things that go down the sink, they tend to have more organic compounds in them, and so it's just like food rotting. It's the same sort of thing. Yeah,
The
right.
other pollutant that they're worried about is bacteria and viral and like that,
Not
so,
septic too is bacteria.
yeah.
Right, and that's why you're not allowed to store it. Again, unless you do the really advanced system where you're pumping it, and filtering it, and ozonating it, and UV treating it in order to keep the water clean and clear.
And then now in California, it seems like using gray water twice a week is way better than trying to save rainwater from, when was our last storm?
Right.
Until, you know, 2 months from now, we're gonna really want some of that water, and it's gonna be like, oh yeah.
Well, and again, yeah, absolutely. So catchment systems, they're a bit more intrusive and they're less reliable. You know, if your home is occupied 100% of the time, it's generating water constantly. And so gray water can be a great solution for that. But you also have to think, like next week, we're talking rain on and off all week, maybe 3 inches of rain. The amount of 3 inches of rain on top of your whole roof is a lot of water. And if you have a cistern to put that into, that you can capture that and use it into the summer, it probably won't last you all summer long, but it's going to get you part of the way in through the season. And, you know, again, it's whatever is best for your property and your own situation. It's all really dependent on what your goals are.
The other thing on the rainwater catchment, it really is literally, the usefulness is sort of a factor of how much storage can you get in, right?
Mhm.
So, which is our reservoir situation. So up north where it rains more regularly, they're actually in worse shape when it doesn't rain because they don't really store a lot of water because it comes more regularly, right? So, you know, on the project at Victoria Garden Views that we did together, they had 14,000 gallons in the basement of catchment. And so we actually worked together beforehand, figured out how much storage we can get in, and then worked with that as a water budget for landscaping and work backwards in landscaping to sort of live within that. And, you know, and then it either rains or it don't. And then you wish you had a bigger bucket, you know. So there's, you know, there's that, and it really is then, again, where do you live, how do you live, how big's the roof? And there's issues with, you know, as you scale up the system, the kind of engineering that you need for it starts having, you know, the cost benefits ratio starts looking a little ugly, and, you know, you kick into meeting seismic, you know, as you scale it up, it gets a little more expensive. There's sort of a sweet spot. And then again, once you put it in the ground, I kind of favor, first of all, I want to speak towards that integrated team beforehand. Because a lot of things that you can do from landscaping is like, if you call us once the walls are getting finished outside, you've kind of missed most of your opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So, and also that smart engineering, it's like, look, I get that you want underground tanks, but you're going to compact the soil so much that, do you mind never growing anything there? You know, so it's, you want to get smart about it, right? And so inside, you can throw the goals on the table, and everybody looks at it. The builder looks at it, the architect looks at it, the site engineer looks at it, and the landscape people look at it, and you say, okay, and you push those goals around till you get a good solution that's a smart money solution for you, for where your budget's at.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's something made me think that your roofing material is key on whether you want to do attachment as well. If you have asphalt shingles on your roof, you don't want to use that for growing food, because it's got, you know, your asphalt shingles have petroleum in it. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a metal roof or a tile roof or a concrete tile roof, then
you're not getting clean water, yeah.
Absolutely. But there could be you could use it for the beautiful parts of the landscape. Another question?
Is there the technology or the possibility to capture your gray water and refilter it and use it as supply for your house water?
Only for flushing toilets. So, you know, and I actually don't know where that is code-wise in the state. They started revisiting gray water a couple of years ago again. 10 years ago it was illegal to use gray water at all. But they developed the code last year. A couple of LA City Council members actually suggested making gray water mandatory on all new construction in LA. That didn't really get any traction, and unfortunately we'll probably get too much rain before that ever goes anywhere and kill it again. But you know, there are problems with storing and utilizing the gray water if it's not done correctly.
I want to say something about that. So there's such a thing as the right amount of water. So like at UCSB, they put in no water urinals, and then the pipes got eaten. So, and then you'll notice if you have low flow toilets, if you're flushing every 5th time, you flush twice anyway. So there's like the right amount. And then when we talk about water treatment, we decided a while ago that we'd all throw our money in a bucket and do water treatment, you know, in a group. And when we leave it to each property for water treatment, your water health in the neighborhood is as good as the weakest link there, right? So if you got the guy who's just running the water out from everything and the kitchen sink too, you know, is his stuff migrating into others. So I really want to, no man's an island unto himself. It's you are but a small ecosystem within a bigger one, within a bigger one, within a bigger one. So the feasibility of that level of water treatment, as in black water, gray water, go into a bucket and then gets treated to the level of being able to drink it again or being able to flush toilets with it again, is pretty not cost effective at this point in time. You know, you do the cost benefits ratio and you're like, dude, I'll pay the sewage, I'll pay the metered sewer water. I'll know that it's getting clean to a certain standard. And I would advocate for better sort of community water treatment plants, that the water treatment plants are doing smart things, you know, that they're using ecosystem services as much as possible rather than, you know, straight chemical stuff, right? So there's this sweet spot for where we're at in technology right now that you look at and go, yeah, I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit, and the other I'm going to leave I'll leave it to to my property taxes that cover that kind of stuff, you know, because they're gonna get it done, they're gonna get it done health-wise and, you know, so I'm not one of those black water people yet, you know, and I never got into that composting thing either, although my son, they compost all their waste, they use no water, and ain't nobody sick up there, so I guess it's better when you're younger, I think.
Well, I've actually talked to clients in the last couple of years, they shower with buckets in the shower and then take it out and water their plants with that, or pour that into the toilet to
Yeah.
flush it. So that's a really low-tech way of
Yeah.
using gray water.
Of the 70s.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
right.
the 70s, totally.
Kind of taking off what you were saying, I was curious, what about when you see commercial or parkland areas that say recycled water being used?
I dig it.
Yes,
That's
but do they have complicated systems? How do they get
Well,
that?
that's coming back from the treatment plants.
It's coming back to the treatment.
Oh,
plants,
okay.
yeah.
So it's been through the whole rigmarole,
Yeah.
and instead of pumping it into the ocean.
It's literally just missing the chlorination that goes to the, yeah. And I'll tell you to bring a line from, we looked at for Peabody Charter School, bringing a line, the closest reclaimed water was at the golf course on Las Positas, right? No, wait, yeah, hold on, yeah, Las Positas. And it was literally $10,000 per 100 feet to bring that supply line, because you're going into the street. So unless there's a straw that you can hook into real close by, it doesn't, or unless you're a huge property with large water use, which I think we should invest in that. Like if our playgrounds at the schools, our parks also, I mean, look, we all don't need a soccer lawn to play on, we need one close by, right? You know, one that everybody uses, and then, you know, it's got reclaimed water on it. So there's more, so one of the really best things in, if you wanna go low footprint, high sustainability, is share things. Throw your money in a bucket, and, you know, what if we had one driveway per 2 properties instead of one every property? Just put it on the property line, that's half as much pavement, right? So there's some, use the thing that we're used to and improve it, and there's some like new thinking that needs to be done, you know, that will kind of advance you more than just getting a better one of those widgets so that I can use the water, you know, closer in.
Another question in the back?
Yeah, if I may kind of switch the conversation, do you have specific plans that you recommend, both from like a greenfield standpoint as well as those that add color?
A specific plan for what?
Margie's gonna be.
Plans all-
Yeah, Margie's
all
gonna
over
talk about the
yeah.
plans and the landscaping and the things. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah.
Wow, she's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And there's our segue.
You pay her.
Segway.
Segue.
Thank you, Margie Grace.
Hi, so thanks for coming out. I do get that there's other places that you can be, and we really appreciate you being here. And I do thank Allen Construction for bringing us out as well. And so what I look to getting into, actually this is a really good little 20-minute survey of what's out there, right? And so that's enough to get you thinking in the right direction. So my question becomes how to get there from here, right? A little bit of practicality in it. You're not going to have the answers or a fully fleshed out plan when you leave here, but you're going to at least have a way of thinking newly when you think drought tolerant. So mostly when we think drought tolerant, we think cactus, we think succulents,
Rock garden.
miles of gravel, right? And we think fugly. Sorry, but I'm not one of those, right? And I'm telling you, fugly's way worse than ugly, okay? So it always starts with what do you want? So what do you want? How long, you know, you do it one way if you're selling next year, you do it another way if you're living there for 50 years. Purpose, how are you using the yard? Entertaining, play, pets, chillaxing, whatever you do. And then there's pragmatic considerations. We're obviously talking water smart here. Fire smart definitely comes up, and I don't know, I got other things to do, so I want low maintenance as well. And then, you know, budget influences everything. And it have no budget shame. There is no budget that's been built that can't be blown. So figure out what really do you have to work with, and then the question becomes, how do I get the most out of the resources that I'm going to use? So once you figure out what you're doing, you're charting a course. Have a look at what you got. Get real. Be merciless. That thing, you know, where you get naked in front of the mirror, that's what you're doing. So you say, okay, love that. Anything that's healthy that you love, well-established trees, well-established shrubs, they need less water. They've just got a more extensive root system, right? And then you go after the water hogs, okay? So it's like, hey, the lawn's a real easy one. That thing needs an inch of water a week over the whole surface if it's a traditional sod, customary sod. And then when you go to thinking of your design, think this way. Stuff that don't need no water, no kidding. So he talked about, Dave shared with us about hardscape, using that as a collection surface, using that to direct flow, using that for filtration if it's permeable, retention, detention, and filtration. But you know, they don't need no water if it ain't growing, right? So how can you work in things without it having that barren desert fill, right? So, and then your next level is look at things that can capture water. So it's that, we used to just call them, you know, the low spot or the puddle. Now we call them bioswales, or we call them rain gardens, and I think they sell better and the kids feel better who are coming out of school because they know things that we don't know. We're like, oh yeah, we used to like call that a swale. And you know what we do? We let the water go down there and then, you know, it's soak in. So that's still, it's got a better name now. And then you look at what parts are gonna be green and growy and pick smart plants, right? And then you're doing smart irrigation, which we talked about, and the no kidding maintenance has a role in this. When you're growing in a plant and it's a native plant, you have to train yourself to torture it a little. You have to let it's infrequent deep watering. Roots go where there's moist water. So if you're just watering that thing on the irrigation schedule that the installer put in, which is, you know, 20 minutes twice a week, you ain't never gonna hit an extensive root system. You have to get to infrequent deep watering. And then, so the key is, what if you had plants, they need to be established, but what if you could turn off the water in 2 years or in 3 years? Or you only had to turn it on a couple months a year. All right, so that's my plug on that. So we've figured out what we want, and now we've charted a course, and we've prioritized what our new picture out there, our new composition is going to serve the purposes that we care about, and it's going to have stuff that don't need no water, stuff that catches water, plants that don't need a bunch of water, and then we're going to maintain them well, okay? Smart irrigation. So I'm going to run through a bunch of slides, and I want you, if you've nothing else, you leave going, it don't have to be ugly, okay? And then specific moves, you know, you can figure out later. So decking doesn't need any water. That's pretty. Gravel. Squint your eyes, how much of that landscape is gravel? Unplanted, totally don't need no water. And is catching water, filtering water, and letting it infiltrate into the soil. And it's also, because of the color that it is low refractive index, so that it's not a heat sink and it's not getting our heat island effect in the cities. Same thing again, really pretty. Extra nice if you have to have a giant oak tree over it, right? So gravel, but look at this use of different rooms. Once we have an element like a fire pit, there's sitting space around it, right? And it's real different from an unbroken plane of gravel. We've got a little breaking up, the little greeny weeds coming in. And then if we it happens that there's wildland on the other side, right? So we're just planting so that we capture that landscape that's beyond our, the builder's fence there. And we're starting to get a little shady thing that we're gonna sit under here. We're training figs on that. The figs will swallow and they'll join, they'll swallow that structure, and you'll just see only fig wood and figs and fig leaves on that. So there you are, more gravel. Gravel also, again, you know, in that it's look, traditional to modern, to contemporary. This contemporary lends itself and you just get harder lines, but traditional, I mean, look, if it's good enough for Versailles, you guys, it's good enough for us.
On those, on coming back,
Yeah,
do those shrubs have irrigation underneath?
they do. We have drip irrigation underneath, and it is on automatic timers, but there are hose end timers because it's intended to be just temporary. So it is as simple, it's a hose bib, it's one of those little push button timers, and after a couple of years they won't have any water in them at all. These happen to be Australian, this is New World planting. We've got Australian, South African, and natives in here. adapted to the same conditions. So things from other Mediterranean climates, which means Mediterranean climate equals rain comes, hopefully, usually the 3-4 month period, right? And then no rain, no rain, no rain, no rain, 8 or 9 months, and then rain, or no rain. Because our average of 17 inches a year here in Santa Barbara means 1 year, no rain, no rain, no rain, 3 feet, no rain, no rain, 4 feet, no rain, no rain, no rain, a couple feet, couple feet, couple feet. So again, that's where we get back into how much can you store. Because there is a lot of rain falling, and it's okay for the water cycle to have these hiatus in it. From the water coming from the sky to the ground to the ocean, evaporating back up to the sky. It doesn't harm the ecosystem to have some pauses in it at the reservoir, at the, in the tank in your basement. But, or a lot of times the very cheapest reservoir is actually the soil. Okay, so we keep going, gravel. And we're not too old for a sandbox. This is Joan's beach. Joan is client, we did this project together, and she said, she kept doing this. She's going, and I'm like, what? And she said, I just want someplace where I could do this with my toes in the sand. I'm like, easy, we could do that, right? And the synthetic lawn, it's not really my cup of tea over the ground, but it was really great on the roof. It's kind of fun. Bocce courts, sports courts, they don't need any water. So we're still looking at what can we build into the new landscape that we would use, that we like, that we can never irrigate. That's a cool thing. Again, the fire pit, this is the simplest of landscapes. It's all native stuff except for the olive trees. You guys, what if the driveway were sexy? What if you called it a motor court and it's covered with gravel and there's enough to turn around on? There's also just, green vertical walls around it, if you will. This vine is very drought tolerant once established. And I'll tell you again, if you were looking bird's eye view, you'd see a lot of gravel and not much green, right? Green's going up the walls, so you have a lot of it, but you still have, again, good enough for Versailles, good enough for us. I say play with rocks, right? So we got some Mexican beach pebbles. There's some crushed greenstone there. There's no reason why you can't have fun. That is a functioning. The fall on the property was so little, and the outflow side of the pipe. You couldn't take a pipe underground and then hope to daylight it somewhere. It'd be 3 feet under the ground when you got to the other side. So that's just a little canal, a little channel that's rock lined like that, and it plays through the whole landscape and ties it together. And she's got several, just because this is she's a British gardener. Okay, she's a real British gardener. So those guys are about their yards, and so there's multiple different gardens there, and there's these elements that come through the whole thing. Of course, these are nice dry plants, and there's, again, squint your eyes, there's not that much plant material, if you talk about the whole surface area. Play with rocks, that thing's awfully sexy. And then again, it makes a room, and that room needs a floor, which doesn't necessarily need water. And off we go. Again, play with rocks. It doesn't mean you don't get no water. It means just the water that you're using, use it smart. Don't look, and lawns aren't evil things. That lawn that everybody plays on and comes to, it's just that it's that lawn that there's 10,000 square feet and don't nobody do nothing out there except spray chemicals and water, So this actually turns out to be a place that also was an Allen project, and these people needed seating for 40 people in a stage, so this played into this amphitheater seating. It's much bigger, it's more extensive than what we see there. So this is the same project. This really funds a redwood water tower on the adjacent property from 1870s, and this brand new modern thing, and then this 1920s era wall of stone Italian stonemasons. So see this, so if you got a walkway, can it be bigger and more amorphous? And then its footprint is bigger, but it doesn't feel like you paved the world, right? And a little interruption in the gravel can make it feel like, vary the materials. Don't have 10,000 materials out there. Pick a few materials that are in the same color palette, and then what you're playing with is texture. If you think about it in a painterly way, finer brush strokes, broader brush strokes, but all still working together in the color palette. And in this case, this color palette came from this up at Hollister Ranch, and they're in they've got the shale up there, and then they've got this other, you know, kind of munge zone. It's actually out of the fault zone. You know, it's grayer rock, so we went with grayer. You know, the native rock was gray, so that gave us our palette. But you do it right, you get enough gold in the gravelly gold gray, you play with it. So here's some other bioswales, rain swales. You know, you see a lot of them, they look like rockline culverts. It's not really what we're after. Particularly, this is an awfully sexy one, has a little bridge over it. And this is at the friggin' gas station. Come on, that was awesome. That's the only thing in these slides that isn't our work, but we were out looking at kitchen cabinets on this weekend, and I said, stop! And, you know, jumped out and took this picture. So look how greeny grassy that is. So these are grass-like plants, calyxes, and there's those things that I talked about that are low water, they're high water use, but low water demand. Again, they turn out to be mostly vernal pool species. What we have in California is on heavy soils, it rains like hell, the water doesn't soak in. Those plants, they're the plants that do that all the way from soaking to 9 months of drought, okay? All native plants. You got a backdrop like that, how much landscaping you need. Well-established plants don't need as much water. So now we've done the go back in. We got rid of the water hogs. We go back in with as much stuff that doesn't need water at all. The softer hardscape. We've gone through catching some of the water. There's other ways to catch water. Now we're looking at how to get thirsty plants. So there's a strategy of native plants. There's a strategy of get them well established so that they can support them on themselves. And then I wanted you to see a landscape that feels lush and really colorful, but isn't a high water use. Okay, so these palm trees are in there. They're very, very well established. This is in the foothills. We do have an oak tree here, but look at the color. This is a Australian plant, low like that. And again, we're using that sort of the space in a composition, the negative space, right? The green lawn will be the space that allows you to see what else is there. We say you can't see the forest for the trees, but the truth is you can't see the trees for the forest, right? You need a little space in the composition so that you can read what's in it. If it's all up here like this, you don't see it, right? So this gravel is working as that sort of calm ground floor, and these are working different calligraphic brush strokes around here, and then we get into this colors where it's sunnier and where it's shaded some, this Australian ground cover. It doesn't have to be dull, all of that low water. And then, you know, the question is, I mean, maybe you just leave it alone. If you happen to have a space that's like this, you leave it alone. You use some natives that are really showy when they're up, and you put something sexy out there, right? It isn't cactus only. You can really paint with what's out there. There's a really great color, great texture. The succulent thing, it don't have to be succulents alone, you know, just like, you know, where it looks like a botanic garden from that region, you know. You can mix as long as their cultural needs are the same, you can mix them up. So as it turns out that catmint and these succulents take a little bit of shade, and that vine on the wall, they all take the same amount of water and they all take the same exposure, so we put them together. And you can, of course, make a display where here we are playing with rocks again and playing with South African. There's shade-loving, low-water plants. There's the country, there's the city. These things will be perfectly citified, you know, and mannerly if you want to, and mix of succulents and grasses. So the role of water in dry climates. You gotta have some water out there, you guys. If you want life in the garden, you gotta have water. So what you want, if you're attracting wildlife, if you're after supporting as many components of the native biome as possible, if you're looking at your garden as a mini ecosystem, there's gotta be water, so it's smart use of water. You will not have birds, you will not have bees if you don't have some water. So they're little still puddles that dry up every once in a while. I don't like them to be dependent on me watering them. or the other strategy is get it so it dries up before, not before the mosquitoes hatch, but before the larvae change to mosquitoes. Because I will tell you, when this thing's half full of water and there's some little pollywogs swimming in there, the birds are stoked. Never did you get that big a chunk of protein in one place, but you don't want them to go to the next step and start sucking blood, okay? So the strategy here is a little bit of water. You're always using a recirculating pump. There's a basin, no open ponds, right? Because it's evaporation is a function of surface area. So there's a hidden basin underneath there and the pump, and it's also, guess what? It's the open pond where you can see whether the water's skanky or not. The water's still flowing just fine, but it's not, the hygiene, the maintenance isn't as horrible. You know, it's the same thing, little bit of water flowing out, underground basin, recirculating. So this is up in the hills, and they add about 2 gallons of water a week to this. And they run it only part-time, they turn it off at night, so it's running during the high evaporation hours. Again, you don't have to have no water, but you're gonna put a cover on a big piece of water like this. Hidden basin, same thing again, these are architectural salvage from the site itself made into that. This is a 7-foot by 3-foot rock, called them breaching whales, and it's in its own basin, hidden, and it just has, this kind of setup is really great. The birds love it, you know, so it's shallow water as well as moving water. And particularly great for insects. They don't fly into usually big open bodies of water. They're getting off of little surfaces, right? So don't forget the jewelry. Really, a sexy thing amongst pretty simple is stunning, right? Nothing take water, no water like an empty pot. You can also fill them with, you know, things that don't need much water. The key, you guys, if you're doing pots, is lots of soil. You know, it ain't big plants in a little pot. It's a more pot, enough soil, and then plants. You're adding structure with pots. You can add as much detail as you want. You know, you can go look at the worlds within the worlds if you like. Beautiful furniture. Don't need no water. Looks real nice. On a bit of gravel, there you can see the shapes and the sculpture of the thing. And you're allowed, you guys, when you talk about curb appeal, it's not just, you live there, you get to express yourselves. It's okay to bring that front and center for these guys. They say welcome, relax, and we do a lot of surfing here, right? So you're allowed to do that. And if it has that personality, campy, quirkiness, you know, if you can keep it this side of hoarding and, dead household appliances, you know, in the yard, that's better as far as curb appeal goes. And then for them, really maintenance does matter. How you grow a thing in so it gets established. Don't overlook the value of good maintenance. And then you're gonna wanna stack these systems and Dave knows about this stuff too. So your gray water goes to the landscape, gives you food, makes green waste, compost, and improved plant health, equals less water maintenance and cost. So that is so like just touching the surface, but that's enough to get you thinking or falling asleep, either one. But I hope that you leave with, oh, it doesn't have to be that garden, where it's all that gravel, those rocks, and those cacti, okay? And that's it for us. Questions? Yes?
I love your work, it's absolutely
Oh, thank you.
beautiful. This was really informative. There was one thing that I'm looking for that I didn't see in any of your pictures, which is plants for privacy.
Plants for privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So plants for privacy, a plant for privacy means it's big enough and dense enough that you can't see me. So the question is, how tall, how wide does it need to be, and then you pick it, and then you need something dense. So yeah, definitely, you know, you're gonna identify all your needs, and you're gonna say, well, I need a play area, I need screening, I need to edit that blight from my view, I need to run around naked, and I don't want them seeing me doing it, whatever your thing is, right? And then, I mean, we often describe what the plant is going to function as before we pick the plant. So it's not like, should we do a rose here? No, it's like, no, well, we need something here. I mean, big trees, we look at the architecture of them first and we say, well, what we need is this is an umbrella tree, this is making shade for us, and, you know, we wanna sit under it. Or we want that particular brush stroke, you know, like this, or we're looking for that windswept thing. And so in your mind's eye, you know what function it's going to serve, and then you pick, and then, so that's the first thing. What do I want it to do? And then, okay, what's the neighborhood like for that plant? Well, it's going to be low water use, it's going to be low maintenance, it's going to be smart fire, and then there's going to be a style that you like too. But it's also that works in our soil, that has the exposure that it has. And then, you know, from the bazillion plants in the world, it finally gets narrowed down to, hey, here's a few choices. You know, you go like that. When I say low maintenance plants, what the idea is, you pick a plant that grows to the size that you intended to grow to, and you leave it alone. So that thing where you put in a 40-foot tree and keep trimming it to a hedge, it just wears you out. I also, it got edited out here, but there are lower water use lawns out there now. UC Verde buffalo grass, we used it. Victoria Garden Muse, I don't like the way it goes naked. I'm onto Agrostis palens now, native sod that can be cast as seed as well, so it's not crazy, stupid, expensive to put in. And the worst thing with that, Dawn is here from our company as well, and she's one of the founders, and she says, I don't like that, but I don't like that lawn. And it's like, well, it's because you kind of have to fire your gardener, and I mean, he or she's gonna really want to water it like a normal lawn. It's like, dude, you're rotting this lawn out. So I'm taking the key away to the controller, and it's really like, you're allowed to water twice a year, and that's it. You gotta get it established and then just leave it alone. We water at night, multiple spurts during the night. This is not what you do with lawns. A normal lawn will rot out. These ones get mad if you water it during the day. So it's just, you have to, again, any plant that you bring in, you're gonna have to, you kind of better give it what it wants, or it's gonna register its complaint the only way it can, you know, and just crow it, right? You know, they don't have another method. They can't say, gee, I wish you were nicer to me. They just fall over dead, right? All right, other questions? Yes?
What books would be useful for, let's say, the tolerate lots of water but don't need it plants?
There are books that are called plants. There's a great one from the Bay Area Water District, believe it or not, is plants, is dry area gardens or something like that. And if you take my card and you write to me, I'll put that together. And I could also, because I'm going to be putting out notes and stuff, where we could give a couple of useful links or resources. Let's do that. And then there's in Sunset Garden Book, really Sunset Magazine, Sunset Books has really caused the change in attitudes for, you know, first we brought our gardens from England to the East Coast. Kind of works there. You bring them Midwest, not so much. Bring them out west, no way. You just can't do the lawn and the hedges and that like that. Not unless you're going to really live outside your water mains. So they have a section, plants for, shade plants for dry gardens, oak companion plants. There's quite a few lists like that. So if you think about it, oak trees, they don't tolerate non-Mediterranean, or live oaks, non-Mediterranean conditions. They, you know, you water them when it's warm, they like to die on you. So you can, from that, find the shade tolerant plants like that, for dry areas. Anything else?
Some suggestions for mulch types,
Mulch
colors,
types,
sources,
yeah.
and especially weed control.
Yeah.
Water.
So a couple kinds of mulches. When we talk in gardening about mulch, so mulch is that thing that's on the surface that isn't dirt. So you have the soil and then you put something on it. And so they can be organic mulches, which means plant-based, or they can be inorganic mulches, which are a lot of things. They can be tumbled glass, they can be, right, you know, chipped rubber people are using. I think it's kind of weird. If it doesn't biodegrade, it's just, I don't want to sprinkle it all through the soil profile, you know. And then there's a big argument afoot, debate. Sorry. The Australians are like, look, don't mulch these plants. Where in nature, in the chaparral, if you're mulching your natives that are from a place that doesn't build humus, mulch happens like under big trees with water and stuff. Dry areas, you don't have these organic rich soils, right? So the best thing to do is pick a plant for the conditions that you have. Don't pretend you're in another world. So for weed suppression, I'll tell you what I like. For organic mulch, we used to all get, stuff that was chipped. It was a forestry industry byproduct. And then there came this horrible day when we imported these house-eating funguses. And mostly they don't eat the house because we don't have those conditions where it's wet and warm. But it happens some. So what I like now, I like to just take the product from our green waste stream and use the local recycled mulch, because at least there, it's better the devil you know, right? So this, at least it's local spores and it's local pathogens that you're getting into. You're not borrowing things from elsewhere. So you already have those spores. You guys think about just on our skin, we have horrible pathogens, but it's managed by our skin. So if it gets out of balance is when you're in trouble, right? So it's the same thing again, is mulch, but do this in a way that doesn't cause a problem and get you out of whack.
It seems pretty varied and kind of
It
iffy
is.
sometimes though.
It is, yeah, it is. They're doing now, both Marburg and the county are doing screened mulch, because of that thing where you were picking, creepy stuff out of there. You're just like, really? That was a bad idea. You get that load that has a lot. But I'm going to tell you what I like about it is that it seems to be partially composted. When you get the tree trimmer stuff, right, that it's just raw green wood, it isn't broken down at all. In that interface with the soil, it's actually sucking nitrogen out of the soil, because the microbes that are doing the decomposition of the green stuff are, they need nitrogen. So you actually can wind up with these sort of weird little localized nitrogen deficits, and you're like, but I'm adding organics to the soil, what's that about? So I stay away from the tree chipper thing, and then you'll get a batch that's like an ash tree, and you're like, oh good, every one of those seeds is good for an ash tree forest. So that's variable in another way, but it's also got more, it hasn't done any composting. You see when you get the mulch delivered from the county or from Marburg, and it'll sit there and steam. There's biology coming in there.
So which is a better source, Marburg?
I don't know, it's
Do they have
different.
different grades?
They all have a range. I mean, it's what they're collecting from the waste stream.
So it's just random, you
Yeah,
can't pick a particular grade? Maybe
No, but you
screen
can do this.
No, take it
No,
away.
not this one, no, they won't deliver it to you, take it back, and you can go up there
Oh,
and
okay.
decide whether you're gonna pull from their pile or not, and you just watch it like a hawk, and you go, that stuff is really good, and run down with it. But, we're usually dealing with 40 yards, that's the biggest trash bin there is, right? 40 yards for $100 delivery, yeah. Because that's the other thing, this much mulch don't do nothing. This much mulch will give you weed control. And so it's about not letting the light hit the surface of the soil, so seeds don't germinate. And then also, so organic mulches are going to give you, you're looking for a blanket. Keeps sunlight out, keeps water in, and regulates temperatures, wild swings in soil temperature. So, boy, I'll tell you what, you get to people who really garden, talk your freaking ear off it, and you'll have as many one right ways to do it as you talk to people. So, yes.
What about using pebbles?
I'm a fan of inorganic mulches. I am. Like we said, there's the ones that are, carbon-based, plant-based, and then there's that mulch that covers the soil. Now, so that's the thing. I just look at this situation, right? I don't put a bunch of inorganic mulch under an oak tree. What wants under an oak tree is oak leaves, And it is an important part of their little, tiny, teeny little, the way they do their life, is the leaves come down, they bring the nutrients back up. So I look and I see, but yeah, so we work with gravels, pebbles, glass mulch. I don't like the plastic and the rubber. I'm just like, then what? You get it out of there if you don't want it. It doesn't break down. So I stay away from those. I like newspaper mulch just fine. Lasagna gardening, that lady cracks me up. She used to hire somebody to turn the soil and get her stuff in. Now she's just like, I'm old, I hurt, I can't do that, and the money's low, so she started laying our newspapers out, and now we have digital, we don't have newspapers, so, what are you gonna do? And then like, Dennis Allen, Allen Construction here, the founder, his wife is like, she used to be compost, it was a she spent more time on that than on, you know, washing her hair and stuff, you know, not that she didn't spend, she was well-groomed. But I mean, the composting, she was a dedicated composter, right? And she's like, you know what I do now? I dig a little hole, I put when I have my little bucket of stuff out of the kitchen, I dig a little hole, put it there, bury it up, done. Go to the next one, boom, done, you know? Because let's move it from this bin with that stuff, and let's go to the next one with that stuff. Ooh, I didn't get the brown stuff quite right with the green stuff and this one. All of us have been there, and and then the tumbling thing with the leachate coming out, and it's like, oh, that's you know, so it's just like, well, you know, there's a plan for this, it's called biology, let's just, and the only reason she's burying it, because it goes faster and the raccoons don't drag it around. So, you know, so there you go. I mean, it is fine something you can live with, you know. I'm on to now, isn't there a composter that I could just step on it like the trash can and put that stuff in there, but it's close enough to the kitchen that it can't stink. And so, you know, I spent $400 on this thing, I can't remember the name of it, I really like it. And you buy pellets, you know, sawdust pellets come in the mail, you put chicken bones in there, and 2 weeks later it's compost. So it's fast, small batches. Other people do giant batches and do the, so that's kind of what you, and then there's bragging rights, like, look, I'm working on my fort. My fort's cooler than your fort. This is how I do it. I'm a dedicated compost. You know, there's all that, so there's a lot of things to garden, reasons to garden, right? And reasons to compost and waste compost. What else? Yes, sir.
So my question is kind of twofold. I've been sourcing for a project that we're at our maximum impermeable space. So I've been looking for porous concrete, which I found a few, but it seems kind of like the Wild Wild West, like they're really unregulated and it's hard to really get.
And they look like Rice Krispie treats, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want that on the ground.
Right, and it looks like kind of like the playground stuff.
Yeah.
So when you said the motor core, my gears started turning. But how do you keep the dust down, and like what is
Okay, so
what's the
here's-
composite of the motor core?
Here's always the thing. Oh, for driving out. Well, so first of all, you're going to have an argument. Everybody defines what's impervious and what's permeable different ways. So, like technically, you know, DG, decomposed granite, what we call decomposed granite around here is a permeable thing, but it don't percolate because it's got fines, you know, clay particles up through small, you know, small gravel size. And we like that because then it packs, right? What you need are things that are, you know, got a lot of space in them so that, you know, round big marbles, you know, so that there's space in between and there's then the capacity to percolate and to also store water, right? And then once you got that, you got to stabilize that stuff because it acts more like fluid. You know, gravel and sand act more like fluids, right? So now, you know, it's sort of like Dave alluded to this, like, well, how deep are you going into this thing, you know, because it can snowball. So here's the thing, if they will let you, so if your question is what gravel isn't so dusty that it isn't like a nightmare house cleaning, go with something hard. So you're gonna, gravel is crushed rock. So what rock are you crushing? Are you crushing something that's dusty like a shale or if we go to mudstone, you know, what do you think about it? So sedimentary rocks are going to be dustier typically than igneous rocks. So we go to granite over a shale, you know. So where are you located? Malibu. So your guy, like Bourget Brothers, you could see everything that there is there, you know, that's down in Santa Monica. I think Santa Monica. There'd be everything that there is around in that area, you know, that looks good. So take whatever your rock is that you're using, go down there with it and look and see color. So just pick something that, again, if it was good enough for Sci, and I know they had staffs of, you know, they had 100-person staff, and most of us don't have that. But what we find is for us, they're going to say something about this too. Is like if in Santa Barbara our code is no, the gravel has to be stabilized if it's within 100 feet of the sidewalk, if there's a sidewalk, or curb if there's, you know, no sidewalk. And that has to do with the pollutant called sediment, you know. So if you're just allowed to like throw the gravel down and drive on it, that's one thing. But if you're not, it has to be stabilized, then you're gonna probably get into, you know, the paving blocks or the different paver materials, which we don't particularly like the look of, right? And every single thing that's gonna be called permeable, oh, Santa Monica, that is fun down there. No, Malibu, not as bad as Santa Monica. Used to, in that region that has the clean the bay regulations and ordinances. Okay, yeah, that's fun down there.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
been last.
everything that has this permeability, right, you have to keep the pore space clean. So things that generate dust and gravel eventually clog those pores. And that's gonna be the downside of all the permeable, the permeable concrete that we put down. It's only as good as you keep it clean, right? Otherwise, you know, all the nooks and crannies get filled up and then water don't move through it anymore.
When I think of motor court, or in the picture that you showed, I think of, well, I mean, it's all gravel, right? But I don't think of gravel that's large enough you can pick up, that it's so finite and it's compacted.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, you know, like if you were to water it, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But, and so I picture like a really
Deep
compressed
bed,
dirt,
yeah.
and I don't really know
It
what the dirt
won't,
is.
it won't be very permeable because that's what, again, the difference between permeability. And so we'll talk about percolation rate
It'll
on
just run
things,
off.
is the cleanest way to do it, yeah. So that's why DG is technically permeable. I mean, concrete's permeable. 3%, you know, it's a really slow acting sponge, right?
Right.
You know, so it's gonna be what your local ordinance is gonna say what is acceptable and what's not
So the
acceptable.
motor courts, like I guess the answer to that is it's not really permeable.
Well,
either,
the
even
other
though
thing
it's
too-
dirt.
Yeah, even though it's dirt, yeah. And you won't be happy typically with just dirt with
Right.
gravel thrown on it when it gets raining. So a lot of us have asphalt that's chip sealed, you know, asphalt, tar, you know, gravel smushed into the tar, you know, chip seal. Chip and seal if you're from the Midwest. If you are in that area and you're at your maximum impervious surface, then you don't have an answer. You don't have a solution. You're not going the cheap route. It's going to be that base, that you know, the surface that you know 12 inches of gravel, clean wash gravel, some stabilizing unit, and then like that. Now, what you could do instead is, remember Dave said, what if you have chunks that's impervious, but in between, the water can go down into that bed that's below it that is essentially the reservoir and the cleaning, the space for storage and the filtration, the soil below. So, yeah, pavers with gaps in them work. And then, you know, you just have to build the system up so that it works. I really like, what style's the house?
What's that?
What style is the architecture?
It's transitional, contemporary.
Stepstone, ink. Everything they make is really, really ugly, except this one thing. So Cal Art pavers, like California architectural pavers, and really, you'll go on their site and go, oh, I'm at the wrong place. Cal Art pavers, like California architectural pavers, they have some nice pavers in there. What it is it's sandblasted concrete. And it's really a nice product on site. You don't have concrete washout, you have uniformity of color. You know, a lot of us, you get more than the 9-yard track. Well, each 9 yards looks a little different from the other 9 yards. So then they try to mix it up by doing every other piece, but then just so it's buried in a different way. But you know, you don't have any waste on site. You don't have any soil pollution from, you know, just pouring concrete. But you can build it up out of some pavers that you like the look of, you know. You can do it out of stone pavers as well. I mean, why spend less, you know? but it's less what's on the surface than how it's built underneath it. Next.
What if you used, instead of gravel between, let's say, a solid thing like river rock? Wouldn't that be far more permeable than, say, gravel or?
You know what's really interesting, because I've had that debate before too. Not that I'm not arguing things, but I'm just like, dude, really? So take a volume of sand, take a cup of sand, take a cup of 3/8 inch gravel, take a cup of big old rocks, and I'll be damned if it doesn't work out to be about 50% porosity in no matter what the particle size is. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, how does that work? And then I'm like, well, probably about the same way computers do. I don't know. It's here. And having said that, the engineering standard for gravel for porosity has always been whether it's 1/8" gravel all the way up to when you start calling it cobbles, And look, geologists clay is not clay, and gravel is not gravel. Because the geologists have one definition and the engineer has another definition, the geologist has another definition. So for me, and I'm trained as a geologist, so I'm like, oh, I don't know, whatever, about that big. So I just don't even get into calling it something. I just do particle size. So here's the thing with that is that when an engineer is figuring what's the pore space, what's the porosity, what's the storage capacity of gravel, traditionally we've always used 40%, but the new and improved Santa Barbara area, so there's a state mandated, Clean Water Act stuff that kicked in mid-2013, stormwater management prevention plans, and you either are gonna hit the state standard or better. So Santa Barbara, because we're really innovative, we're gonna do better. So now instead of 40% porosity, you have to use 32%. So freaking what, right? Well, the problem is how big of a pit do you need full of gravel to accommodate that amount of water? Well, it's just got to be a lot bigger. So why does that bug me? Why that bugs me is because if that's gravel underground, unless it's pretty vertical, there's a whole bunch of space that's gravel and however much soil you can get on top of it, and so that limits what you can plant. And then the engineer will be, well, I don't care whether you agree with the engineer or not, they're going to require you to compact it a certain amount back. You're going to wind up with soil that's not living. It's going to be hyper compacted. It's going to be, you have to spend time. We're still at Victoria Garden use. There was no way not to have it. You can't do dense construction without wiping out your soil. You can do limited construction on a big place and not mess up that other soil. But if you're doing 4 units on a 1/4 acre, you're messing up the soil, right? Period. So you have to spend this time getting the healthy soil back, that will percolate, that has active microbial sweep that's healthy and that kind of
So basically, you better plan to move it off and then sink it elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I didn't win that, the push and shove, and remember I talked about the integrated team? Those were some lively discussions from time to time. We were smart enough to know to bring wine, at least, and the engineer, well, the only thing is there's code written, and look, the guy who's doing something different, it's like the gray water. State said you can do gray water now, but county health said, I know that's a state mandate, but you can't because of whatever. First time I built with bamboo, the structural engineer down the city said, we don't have code on bamboo. I'm like, excellent, see you later. Hey, come back here. I said, you know what's going to be critical is how we attach that bamboo structure to the framing. So how about we look at that? Excellent. So we gave them some okay, let's look at the fasteners stuff. Okay, that ought to work. And then they got to charge me, got my stamp, and I got out of there and built the thing out of bamboo. And I'm not a big innovator. It's just like, look, they're doing it there. In New Zealand they're building pole houses. It's not like reinventing the wheel. And it is. Like at Victoria Garden use, the architectural codes were, we can't see the solar panels on top of that thing. And you're like, we could have pulled rank because the state regulations say, so what? There's a $1 million solar roof initiative and bill that's been passed. So you gotta let us do it. But then we have to work with these guys later. So it's a marriage, you're all in it together. If you get positional about this stuff, you're not gonna get anywhere, you'll just get stopped, So, kind of like Congress, If you're that rigid, you ain't gonna get anything done, period. No matter what your viewpoint, it's the rigidity, it's the finding the way through that works. Anything else? Did that answer the question? Okay.